morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee. I'm one of your moderators, John Becker. Glad to have you with us this morning. We have two veteran prosecutors with us, Ryan Desmond of Blount County and Sharm Allen of Knox County. It's great to have both of you with us.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
I'm going to introduce our panel. We'll get started on questions. John North's my colleague here, and this is our panel, the illustrious and esteemed Eddie Smith, who is a Republican, former state lawmaker.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. And Don Bosch, the same. He is a Democrat and a defense attorney.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's start with a big picture because we have two veteran prosecutors, and the idea for this broadcast is to get your take on kind of where we stand in terms of crime activity right now. And we'll start, as I mentioned, with the big picture. General Allen, we'll begin with you. We hear that crime statistics across the country are down in terms of violent crimes. Is that true for Knox County?
Yes, certainly true for Knox County.
And where are you seeing anything differ in terms of that compared to national statistics?
I would say our violent crimes are down, which is on trend with national statistics. We can look at our homicide numbers, for instance. As year to date, right now, we've had 5 homicides. Several years ago, we topped out at 55 homicides for the year. So significant decrease in the homicides. I can tell you that our vehicular homicides are not trending down. Vehicular homicides are actually trending up a little bit. And they're the one thing I would say that I'm probably most concerned about.
And is that people driving under the influence? What is the nature of those crimes?
The vast majority of them, they can be by intoxication or by recklessness, and the majority of them are due to intoxication.
General Desmond, how about your perspective on the same question?
Yeah, likewise, our violent crime numbers are significantly down in Blount County. Firearms-related crimes, robberies, things of that nature have really dropped off. Our overdose numbers are down. Our deaths from overdoses have decreased significantly. I would say overall drug charges in general have remained pretty steady, but regarding violent crime, certainly a large drop-off.
Let me move to drugs real quickly and then we'll bring in the panel, but we're hearing a lot more about synthetic drugs. We're hearing that from the Regional Forensic Center about what they're finding in terms of people who have overdosed or died. General Allen, what's your perspective on synthetic drugs and variations of those drugs?
Well, if you look at the last 3 years, I think, if you look at the number one drugs found in all of our overdoses in Knox County, and I'm assuming they're the same in Blount, but I don't know, but it has been fentanyl, number one, followed by meth, followed by cocaine, and then last is xylazine coming in. But that's been consistent and steady over the last 3 years.
General?
Yeah, as far as overdoses go, I would echo General Allen, but the amount of synthetic drugs, some of them which are legal and accessible in our gas stations, it's scary stuff. It really is. These are substances that can significantly impair individuals. Individuals can overdose on these substances such as kratom and things of that nature. And from a prosecutorial perspective, they're tougher to prosecute because sometimes your labs will catch, these molecules, but sometimes they won't. Sometimes, the chemists are always ahead of the lawyers. The chemists, they can alter compounds to where they don't fall under a restricted substance in the statute. And then you're trying to catch up legislatively to say we have a new substance that we haven't seen before. It's not illegal yet, so now we've got to go through the legislative process to make it illegal, and that could be a complicating factor.
Ryan, we might argue that most everybody are ahead of the lawyers when it comes to society.
Fair enough.
Sharm, you said something interesting when we were talking about drugs, and you mentioned the drugs that are really prevalent right now. Methamphetamine, crystal meth, that's sort of made a comeback. Talk to us a little bit about that. We used to always think, I remember in the 90s, I'm representing sometimes some of these mom and pop meth manufacturers, and you had to do these vast detoxifications of homes and things if you could even afford it. But it's changed now, how it comes in and how we get it. Tell us about that.
It has, and like I mentioned, meth was the number 2 killer last year. So, and we are seeing more meth than anything. I would say I signed more meth indictments than any other drug.
Why? What's the societal cause behind it, if you know?
Money money. The cheapest drug you can get right now in Knox County is meth. And it's not the old type of meth like you're talking about. Back in the day, in the 90s, it was the shake and bake meth, where you cooked it up in the pot. That's why you can't go to the drugstore and buy certain types of Sudafed without signing for it, right? That's not what we're seeing at all. Now it's the crystal meth coming in mass production from Mexico.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's what
I
you're
would
seeing.
echo that. And not getting into an immigration debate, but the flow of fentanyl, I think, has decreased through the border. And a lot of times I'll see things that are cut with fentanyl. It's half meth, half fentanyl. And I think the minimization of the flow of fentanyl to some degree has pushed those dealers back towards the meth game. Okay, we don't have the ease of access to fentanyl that we may have had, a few years ago. Let's go back to what the tried and true method of methamphetamine.
But just to follow and finish, and Eddie, I'll let you go. We're seeing other agents, though, other than fentanyl, as a cutting agent that are even more lethal now. Sharon, we were talking earlier, we're trying to figure out how to pronounce the last drug that you mentioned, but that is even more important than carfentanil. I'm curious, are you seeing, Ryan, the carfentanil cases and the other cutting agents that are killing people just as quicker than original fentanyl?
Absolutely. The xylazine that she mentioned and the carfentanil are absolutely being used as cutting agents. So they're taking a product and they're putting something incredibly potent in it, and someone thinks they're getting heroin or something like that, a more traditional substance, but instead it's got these very powerful, much more powerful than heroin. The fentanyl, much cheaper as well, and that's why they're cutting those substances with that, to make them more potent but less expensive.
Well, and I'm curious, just looking at trend lines, because I think it's where we can learn a lot. Back in 2016, 2017, the legislature repealed the Intractable Pain Act, helped to shut down a ton of the pill mills in this area. Was that one of the things that's helped reduce some of this additional crime? But it's also now kind of the reverse of that is why we're seeing some of these other things rise, because of the lack of the availability of pill mills and such.
Well, I think that the closing of the pill mills was a wonderful thing, but I think the closing of the pill mills is what caused the turn to heroin, and then I think heroin turned to fentanyl, and then I think the drug that you're referring to, I think, is cyclorphine.
Cyclorphine, carfentanil, then cyclorphine.
That's the new drug that the medical examiner has just found in our area, and I think she's got somewhere around 50 deaths attributed to it. Wow. We're not seeing it, like my drug prosecutors haven't seen it, and I think that the people that are actually dying from it don't even know that's what they're dying from, because I don't think anybody's going out and saying, I'd like some cyclorphine.
Right.
That's not what they're going to their drug dealer and requesting. They're requesting the fentanyl. They're requesting the heroin, and what they're getting is the cyclorphine and the carfentanil and these drugs that are being mixed in as cutting agents, just like Ryan said.
We've got to take a quick break on Inside Tennessee. Back with more perspective from these two veteran prosecutors right after this. Back on Inside Tennessee with two attorneys general, one from Blount County, Ryan Desmond, another from Knox County, Sharm Allen. Great to have you both and your perspective this morning. John?
Generals, we've seen over the decades sort of a shift in mindset about victims and thinking about crime victims and also incorporating them into the whole criminal justice process. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, I think come November we have also an amendment which will be on the ballot, I believe, for people to consider, which would codify or include more rights for victims. I'm just curious, I know both of you have been much more conscious of that and trying to work harder on that. General Desmond, let me start with you. How are you all working to do that? Are you able to sort of satisfy and help and work with victims? And what do you think about the November ballot measure?
Sure. Well, I mean, the criminal justice system can certainly be confusing and elusive to those who aren't familiar with that process. And I think the legislature has done a great job of listening to the voices of victims who went through that process and said, I didn't feel like I was heard. I didn't feel like I had a voice. And understandably, the criminal justice system is focused on protecting the rights of the accused, but there is a balancing act that can be played there to make sure that the victim has a platform from which to speak from. And the legislature's done a great job through the Victims' Rights Act, which was a constitutional amendment, which they're going to be adding to in the November ballot measure. I think just to make sure that the court is directed to give that moment to victims, to make sure that victims have a role in that process, not that it necessarily controls that process, but that they have a role and a voice in that process. And I'm very supportive of that measure, and I think the November ballot measure is a good step in that direction.
General Allen.
Same. I'd echo the same.
Let me follow up, if I may. I'm also curious. We have had other district attorneys general who have been on the show, and one thing they have said repeatedly is, I wish I had more victims witness coordinators to help me, because I need to be able to have that communication with those people involved. And they've expressed concern that they haven't been able to have enough, and there have been maybe grants that have been in jeopardy, federal grants. What about that? What's the situation for your office?
We have victim witness coordinators who are both on the state payroll, but also on in the grant positions. And you're right, those grant positions, we fight with them every year about, are we going to have these grant positions or not? So what we're doing, I think, across the conference is trying to move most of our victim witness folks that are currently on grants into permanent state positions for fear of losing them, because they are so critically important.
Sharon, did you lose any federal money during the DOJ cuts, as they came to be known?
No.
For victim witness coordinators?
No.
I'm fortunate.
You've lost most of that through the VOCA. It's the VOCA fund that's actually, Congress has not been funding over the years, so it's actually been reducing, because it's not just affecting you all, but a lot of other service organizations as well.
Yes.
I'm fortunate to serve as the finance director for the State District Attorney General's Conference. And what we've done is, when we have funds in our year-end balance, we will then fund those VOCA positions to try to move them off of those grant positions, because we're in such fear of losing them, which is great, except those could be used to fund assistant district attorneys, prosecutors, and things like that, which are also greatly needed. But because of the uncertainty in the grant world, we've used those funds to try to move those VOCA positions into state positions so we don't lose them at the end of the year, because we've been close several times to doing so.
So, Sean, let's talk a little bit about the 313 program. And we know what that is, but we've had a problem with Detroit drugs coming down through the interstate system. Tell our viewing audience what the 313 program is, and has it worked?
313 Initiative is a collaborative effort between state, local, and federal law enforcement officials, as well as the district attorney generals from the East Tennessee area, and it is to combat drugs coming into our area from Detroit, Michigan. Michigan's area code is 313. That is where we got the name for the initiative. But we will all work collaboratively, targeting the drugs coming in specifically from Detroit.
What kinds of drugs, and why Detroit?
That seems to be where our drugs come from. That is the main supply chain. I believe it's because they come down I-75. They come from Detroit, they come down, they end up here in the East Tennessee area. The reason that I think the initiative is so successful is because everybody's sharing information. It's a share that is a real-time share between law enforcement, prosecutors, and all the surrounding districts. The last numbers I looked at were April, I believe, and we at the time have made just about 500 arrests, and we've removed just about 300 guns and just multiple hundreds of pounds of drugs off the streets, with 313 coming directly from Detroit.
And I'm curious, because of what you're seeing coming out of Detroit, you and I know.
Those pesky Canadians, by the way.
Well, I'm curious what you're seeing, how that's affecting, especially in what a lot of people will know as sex trafficking, but really it's the familial trafficking, because that's where a lot of those drugs transactions are happening, as grandparents or aunts, uncles are selling kids for sex. How is that helping you all in fighting that issue that's been prevalent in this area?
Well, I will say we've been fortunate in Blount County not to be hit really hard with the human trafficking. Most of our human trafficking actually comes from overseas, Asia, places like that. So we've not been hit real hard in the familial trafficking part of it, but it is the same corridor. That I-75 corridor, they put their hooks in every kind of major city along that corridor, Indianapolis, Cincinnati. They work their way down. And we as East Tennessee prosecutors are focusing really hard to try to, if you want to go from Louisville, go to Atlanta. Just skip East Tennessee, because we don't want you on that I-75 corridor through East Tennessee. And that's why the collaborative approach has been really important, because that 75 corridor runs all the way from the Kentucky border to the Georgia border.
Does the 313 have to sunset anytime soon, or do you all have to renew it by consent or anything like that? Or do you just keep going so long as you want?
I don't think it was a legislative creation. It was more of a collaboration between the district attorneys, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and then the local drug task force for all those individual jurisdictions.
We got to take another quick break on Inside Tennessee. Back with more, and not just on drugs and crime, but the root cause. We'll ask these two veteran prosecutors about that right after this. We're back on Inside Tennessee talking about not just crime, but the root cause of it and some strategies that these two attorneys generals have used to try to combat the problem of recidivism, people going into jail, coming out, and then going right back in. If I'm correct, it's about 30% in the state of Tennessee. It's 44% if you're in the federal system. General Allen, let's talk about your alternative treatment courts and their effectiveness. Drug court, veterans court.
We have a drug court, a veterans court, and we have a mental health court as well. And they are very successful. As you know, we have a lot of individuals who are in the Knox County Jail that are there because they have mental health problems or drug addiction problems. They are committing crimes, but they're a result of that root mental health problem or that drug problem. And so if we are able to take those crimes and those criminals and look at that and separate out the folks that are really just getting started in the drug trade, who really are just have an addiction issue that we think we can save and send to drug court, extremely successful. We have about 100 folks at any given time. We have graduations continually, and it is a long, arduous program. Judge Cerny does a really good job with that, and we have had significant success with drug court as well as the mental health court.
Part of that is the partnership that they develop with a fellow veteran or someone who helps them. It's sort of an accountability person, if you will.
Yes, and it really is. Those courts are kind of different when they come back before the judge on a much more frequent basis, and the judge is almost like a parent in a way.
Counselor, that's right.
Really, a counselor, a parent, because they have that frequent interaction, and they're really there to say good job or bad. Good or bad. It's really just telling them on a weekly basis how they're doing and holding them accountable immediately. And it's not holding them accountable necessarily by always sending them to jail. It is oftentimes, you're going to write a paper and you're going to share that paper with everyone else in the room. And that kind of really parenting, counseling, accountability, a lot of these folks haven't had in the real world, and so we found that to be very successful.
General Desmond, your perspective on the courts likewise.
Yeah, I think they're incredibly important because the reality is for a person seeking help, you cannot just return them to the same environment from which they came with the same bad influences out there. You've got to get them the resources and the ability to combat those bad influences before they ever get back that. And what the treatment courts do is they slowly transition them, not back to their same neighborhoods and homes, but to areas that are safe. And what I really see what works is when a participant in these programs starts to be proud of the progress that they've made, and they start to just feel inside that they're worth something to their community, to their neighborhood. That's when the hooks really sink in, because they want to be successful. And when they can tell their families and friends, I've got this job, I'm paying my rent, I'm paying my taxes, I've got my driver's license, and they start to become proud of who they are, that's when their long-term chances for success greatly increase. And I think the treatment courts do a wonderful job of just moving them slowly along that process to where that switch flips, and they say, I can do this because I've made these gains, I've made this progress, and I want to see it through to the end. And I think the treatment courts do great with that.
So Ryan, if you could change one thing in the system right now, what would it be? Charm, I'm going to ask you the same thing.
Yeah. If I could change one thing in the system right now, I think it would be increasing the access to mental health treatment, because there are very limited resources. I think those individuals who revolve in and out, I know why we shut down our mental health facilities decades ago. But I think that was a mistake. I think there are people there that no longer have a place that can give them the treatment that they desperately need, the medication that they desperately need, and the jails and the criminal justice system is left to deal with these individuals, and we're not equipped to do so. I think we have a real hole in our system right now for those individuals whose root cause of their criminal activity is mental health, and we're not equipped to really combat that.
One thing, and you can't pick mental health.
I would have picked mental health if it had not been stolen. But I think a close second for me would be sentencing. I would change the sentencing structure.
How so?
simplify it. I can't tell you exactly how I would do it, but the overall goal would be to simplify the sentencing structure.
It's hard for
Nobody
all of us to
understands
tell,
it.
right, you get a sentence of 5 years to serve, to tell a client and you to tell victims, how long does that really mean?
And nobody can do that. You can't do it. I can't do it. The judge can't do it. It changes constantly. The red date changes. The safety valves.
TDOC can't seem to do it either.
TDOC can definitely not do it. So nobody can be honest about sentencing. So probably sentencing.
General Allen, General Desmond, we appreciate your expertise and your time. Thank you so much.
Thank
We're
you.
back with more of our conversation with these guys right after this. Back for What's the Gossip on Inside Tennessee, a nod to Dennis Francis. May he rest in peace. Don Bosch, let's look beyond the generals. You deal a lot with crime, but you also have your focus on county politics, and something caught your eye this week.
It did. Larson J., he could have just sort of mailed in these last few months on county commission. Obviously, he's very disappointed that he did not prevail in the primary for mayor, but he came to the table this week with an interesting, albeit a bit pie-in-the-sky plan to reinvent traffic and commuter patterns and pedestrian use and green spaces in Knox County. That would be, upwards of $1 billion, I think, to get it done, maybe more. But I commend him for staying in the game. He could have gone to the House and just sort of mailed it in, as I've said, and he's staying active, and I hope Larson continues to remain active in the community.
John North, a story broke earlier this week that involves the primary election. Explain that to viewers.
Right. As you remember, the sheriff's Republican primary winner was Brent Gibson. There were 3 other men, 2 of whom have since been indicted, which was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Mike Davis, the 4th candidate, raised the question of, hey, there were all these votes cast for David Amburn and for J.J. Jones. What if they hadn't been on the ballot and they're now indicted? Maybe those votes could have gone to me. We don't know. So he was seeking some review in that regard, but we learned this week that state Republican Party leaders will be taking a look at that whole question and who should be the Republican nominee for sheriff later this month. And I wanted to ask you, would you guess they will change anything at all?
I would guess they're not going to change anything. All they could really do is say we're going to rehold the primary again in the August timeframe because, again, there's no Democrats, so they could hold another primary and just let it be done. Again, when you look at the numbers, I think Brent Gibson was around 48%.
Pretty broad lead.
I mean, you would have to assume that all
2%
of those
of the Amburn JJ vote would at least 2% would have gone to Brent Gibson. It's mathematically a virtual impossibility.
But again, it's up to the party because they're the ones.
They control their
yes, because it is a primary. It's
and let's
not
not
a
forget
general
who Mike
election.
Davis's wife is. She does swing
That's
a
right.
fairly large stick in the Republican Party.
Also up for election later.
That's right. But wouldn't you be surprised if the Republicans said, no, we're going to do this over again?
Normally, yes, but at this time, with what's going on in the world, nothing surprises me.
All right. Well, we're going to leave our discussion there. We appreciate you watching on Inside Tennessee. Remember, if you've missed a prior episode, you can check us out online on the Inside Tennessee page. Last week, we heard from 3 leaders in the city about violence interruption and what's working. You'll hear from the mayor, the police chief, as well as the Office of Safety Coordinator, LaKenya Middlebrook. They're online right now if you'd like to watch them. Again, we hope to see you next week right here on Inside Tennessee. Hope your June is starting well.